Hello, my name is Sebastian and I'm here to talk about Gone Home and how some of the depictions of LGBT themes within the game actually might not be helpful to the discourse surrounding LGBT issues. Gone Home is a game released in 2013, created by Steve Gaynor and the Fullbright company. For a brief summary, it is essentially about a girl who returns home from overseas and wanders around her empty house, looking at snippets of memories left over from her family who have since left. The game was highly praised for its depiction of the relationship between Lonnie and Sam, the protagonist's sister. Terry Mulcahy of Slate referred to it as an exploration of a runaway lesbian teenager's struggle with her sexuality. It earned critical acclaim for tackling such a sensitive subject with such levity. Danielle Rindeau of Polygon expressed that it was an immensely powerful experience. Despite this praise, I would argue the game relies on stereotypes and a harmful horror aesthetic that actually serves as a detriment to any social commentary the game is trying to make. Take the main relationship between Lonnie and Sam, for instance. Lonnie is depicted in a stereotypically butch manner. In butch bottom, femme top, butch is defined as one expected to be tough, to be a leader, to take care of and protect others, not to cry, not to date other butches, to be sexually dominant, and to take care of chores designated as men's responsibilities. In a sense, butch fulfills a masculine role in a relationship, to define it in heteronormative terms. Lonnie embodies the role of butch in various ways. She is a member of JRTC and has dreamed of joining the army since she was 12 years old, and plays stereotypically masculine games like Street Fighter, a game that features scantily clad women and overly masculine men engaging in physical combat. She dresses kind of punk, in Sam's words. Femme, the counterpart to butch, is someone who is depicted much more passive and stereotypically girlish. Sam doesn't quite fit into the strict dichotomy, but she is depicted as a more feminine than Lonnie, more passive by comparison. She frequently feels uncertain of herself around girls, and shyly engages with Lonnie at the 7-Eleven while she's playing Street Fighter. When Lonnie tells her she's beautiful, she doesn't say anything out of nervousness or regrets it after. Later on, the two of them go to a concert in the city, where Sam is nervous and rolls away from Lonnie when they're sleeping on the same futon, before Lonnie puts an arm around her and confesses her feelings, making the first move. Lonnie also initiates the first kiss, an act typically reserved for men in popular media. Sam differs from femme stereotypes in that she is interested in video games and has an interest in riot girl music, indicating she has some level of rejection for strict gender roles that music tends to critique, as well as creating zines she describes as anti-authoritarian. Lonnie's overly butch stereotypes and Sam's femme undertones make for a cliché relationship, in which one member of the relationship is expected to be more masculine and the other more feminine, which reduces their lesbian relationship into a sort of imitation of heterosexual relationships with a man and a woman. Two women simply playing parts that ought to be reserved for men and women, rather than something different and to be celebrated as independent from gender stereotypes. Jack Halberstam explores this in his book The Queer Art of Failure, where he notes that media portrayals of lesbians are often irrevocably tied to failure in all kinds of ways, with the butch failing to be a woman in the conventional feminine sense by appealing to the male gaze, and both of them failing to do quote-unquote productive things, like reproduce and live inside the confines of capitalist patriarchal society. Beyond the two primary characters, there is also the foreboding presence of her great-uncle, Oscar Mason, who is believed to be haunting the house. His reclusive nature leads people in the town to start rumors about him being a psycho and nicknaming the home the Psycho House. Lonnie has an interest in seeing the Psycho House, and that serves as the first spark in their relationship, when Sam invites her over to see the home. Frequently, they engage in ghost hunts to try to speak to the ghost of Oscar, including keeping a journal of the sightings and attempting to summon his ghost through the ritual with pentagrams and a Ouija board. Oscar brings the two of them together, both initially and over time. Oscar, however, falls into a deeply harmful stereotype about gay men. Oscar is revealed through tiny snippets in the game to be an abuser toward Terrence, Sam's father. This subtext is sprinkled in various ways, including a letter from Oscar in the basement expressing he's committed some sort of transgression that resulted in his own kin abandoning him, leading him to be wanting to be treated as human again, despite being a wretch. He has removed all temptation and sacrifice to prove his commitments, presumably a reference to him selling the pharmacy he worked at to keep himself from his temptations of children getting soda at the pharmacy. Across from the safe this letter is contained in, there is a place for measuring the height of children, which abruptly stops when Terrence is 12 in 1963, presumably when the abuse occurred. Terrence is also grossly homophobic, denying his daughter's sexuality potentially as a result of this abuse. In homosexuality in media, we see gay men are frequently portrayed in media as predators and sex-crazed, particularly toward children. Oscar is the only other gay person in the game besides Lonnie and Sam, yet is depicted as the most disgusting character in the narrative by his actions toward Terrence. The homophobia Terrence has may stem from this encounter that he had with his uncle, which frames the victimization of gay characters in the game as almost justified because it comes from harmful circumstances. Beyond that, the fact that the early stages of their relationship rested on the ghost of Oscar adds a strange element to the game, particularly as the two characters sneak around the house in the attic, basement, or her own room with the door closed. These secret rooms become a representation of the closet, where gay people feel they need to hide lest they experience retribution from homophobic people, but also it becomes a closet for the pedophile in the game, as it is likely these hidden rooms where the molestation occurred. Mixing the hidden sexuality and the hidden pedophilia is a questionable choice that intermixes the two and further associates the harmful acts of child abuse with the completely normal acts of homosexuality. Beyond equating the two closets, the game also takes on a horror aesthetic both in the physical space present in the game and the non-diegetic and the diegetic sound elements. The game features ominous music, a massive dark house that wouldn't be out of place in a 1950s horror movie, and gameplay similar to Amnesia: The Dark Descent or Slender, which focus on exploration and discovering things around the world of the game rather than tangibly winning it in the conventional sense. Many of these games in 2013 were set in the horror genre and became popularized through YouTube personalities playing the game, much like Gone Home. The horror atmosphere of Gone Home leads the player to assume that they are playing a horror game. Multiple times in the game, there are footsteps in the house heard in the distance, pentagrams are scattered around in hidden areas, and what appears to be blood is in a bathtub before we find out it's actually hair dye. As the player explores the landscape of the game and explores the mystery, it's revealed the secret isn't anything supernatural tied up to murder or anything horrific at all, but in fact the secret of the house is that the two girls in the game are lesbians and dating each other in secret. And on another level, the foreboding secret is that Oscar is gay, at least in the sense that he lets out his abusive tendencies on a member of the same sex. The game presents lesbianism as something related to horror. It is the horror of the house, the horror of the game. Despite taking the spooky aesthetic, the game is about sexuality, and the juxtaposition of these things paints homosexuality as something to be feared in the way the supernatural will be feared. Supernatural elements also happen to have historically been used to depict lesbians in a negative way, which is carried over in the game by attempts by the main characters to use rituals to contact the ghost of the psycho house, such as drawing pentagrams. Witchcraft is linked to anti-normative behavior, according to Sophie Wilkinson of Vice, with media depictions like The Wizard of Oz depicting witches with pointy hats, boots, and a claw-like nose of a phallic quality. Often these witches were depicted in a hypersexual way, but also with elements of masculinity to give the subtext that they were lesbian, and therefore should be feared and ostracized. Gone Home depicts the main gay relationship in a positive way, in a landscape that is often otherwise harmful to the LGBT community, as seen barely a year later in 2014 with the early stages of Gamergate and the hostility that the community felt toward women and sexual minorities. Representation is good because it bonds people to characters in the game that they might not otherwise encounter in real life. Despite this, the game relies on stereotypes that are at best ill-informed in the case of Sam and Lonnie, and at worst outright harmful in the case of Oscar and the usage of witchcraft. The game deserves praise, but aspects of the game should be observed in a critical manner. Moving forward, games need to think seriously about the depiction of LGBT games so as not to perpetuate these stereotypes and risk cutting down social commentary. The horror aesthetic is problematic both because of the historical depiction of lesbians as witches to be feared, and because it misleads the player into assuming the secret of the game will be something horrific, when in fact it's just lesbianism. The stereotypes of the game can also be problematic because it perpetuates ideas about the LGBT community, which are not necessarily positive or helpful. Overall, games should do more to challenge these stereotypes moving forward. Have a good day, everyone. Here's my works cited page. Thank you.